Hi, welcome to the second video on the concept of gunas in the Skillful Living series. Just to quickly remind all of us that in the first video I explained that there are three basic qualities that all of us as human beings have in varying proportions. These are the qualities of sattva, rajas and tamas, and each of them brings a certain energy with them as well. So I want to take this discussion a little bit further today and describe the differences in people who are sattvic, that is, they have a predominance of sattva in their nature, people who are rajasic, more rajas, and people who are tamasic, mainly with the energy of tamas in their nature. So starting with what are the differences in terms of what they understand, what they know of life. So the Gita says that sattvic people see the unity of life, the connectedness of all of life. Rajasic people see others as separate. So they tend to focus in a way more on the body than the soul. Therefore they miss that connection, that connectedness. And tamasic people see one part and believe it to be the whole. So in this case they see the body and they think that's all there is. So a sort of a lazy understanding even of themselves. Then moving on to the kind of actions people take based on their gunas. Sattvic people meet their responsibilities, discharge their responsibilities, meet their obligations. Whether it's a pleasant task or an unpleasant task doesn't make a difference to them. Yeah? So long as they're doing what they believe to be the right thing, what they believe to be their responsibility. Rajasic people tend to be moved more by selfish desires, so they will take action to increase their own power in the world or increase their wealth and so on. Tamasic people take action blindly without thinking of its consequences, without thinking about whether there is a waste involved in this action or whether it could harm somebody else. They just take the action without thinking about it too much because they're basically too lazy and too ignorant to really figure out all the rest of it. Once again, just a reminder that we are talking about extremes and most people are not, don't have only one of these three energies, but just to understand these concepts better. Sattvic people know right from wrong. Sattvic people know right from wrong. Rajasic people do get confused because they get confused by their own selfish desires. So if they want something badly enough, they might convince themselves that it's the right thing, even though it may not be. And tamasic people really don't have any idea and don't take the trouble to figure it out. Sattvic people also understand that security comes from within, and they also know how to live in a certain way so that they can achieve freedom or liberation. Once again, Rajasic people are a little confused about this as well. They tend to look for security outside of themselves, in acquisitions, in power, in fame, in the things of the world, which Sattvic people know will not last. Yeah? The Rajasic people may not realize that fully. And tamasic people perhaps don't give it much thought at all. So finally I want to talk about the different kinds of happiness. So sattvic people find true happiness which comes from a mind at peace with itself, with a unity within ourselves as well, a harmony within ourselves and inner peace. Rajasic people chase after worldly pleasures. Once again, as I said, the the pleasures of that you get from acquiring things of this world, including power and fame, which of course don't last, and which actually also can make them then insecure, because when you have something, you can also become afraid that you might lose it, and that breeds insecurity as well. Also, when you get used to acquiring things, you get something and actually in the end it doesn't bring you as much happiness as you thought it would. So then you think, oh, I must get something more, because that's the way you're conditioned to think. You don't understand that happiness and joy will actually come from inside you, and so will security. So this becomes a constant chase for things of this world. And tamasic people, in a way, they can be happy in their own ignorance and laziness, don't really want to move much, don't want to take much action. But they can also be prone to depression, because they're happy so long as things are moving all right, even though they're not taking much action. But if something in their life changes and becomes more difficult, then that can throw them into confusion and depression as well. I'd like to end this video with 3 quotes from the Bhagavad Gita directly on this question of happiness. So I'll read these out now. These come from the final chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verses 37, 38 and 39. That which seems like poison at first but tastes like nectar in the end, this is the joy of sattva, born of a mind at peace with itself. So the spiritual path may seem difficult at first, but in the end it brings true happiness and freedom. The next verse says, pleasures from the senses seem like nectar at first, but it is bitter as poison in the end. This is the kind of happiness that comes to the Rajasic. So they do derive often a lot of pleasure from life. They chase after worldly pleasures and they get them. But then what happens when this is taken away from them, either because their circumstances change or because of death, that final thing that happens to all of us. And the Rajasic people are usually also very attached to their own life as they understand it, life in the body. So they lose life, which they are attached to, at the end. And they, of course, also lose whatever they have accumulated through this life. So there's a great shock towards the end of life. And the final verse that I want to quote, those who are tamasic draw their pleasures from sleep, indolence and intoxication, both in the beginning and in the end. This happiness is a delusion. There is no happiness. You're just in such a fog that you sometimes imagine yourself to be happy, and other times you get pushed by life to be sad or depressed. The intoxication here, of course, doesn't literally mean drunkenness. It just means, again, that living in delusion, living in that fog that I mentioned before. So that's what I wanted to share today about the gunas. This is one of the higher teachings of the Gita, which is why, even in the final chapter we find these verses about the 3 gunas. I hope that's brought some inspiration, some understanding. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Namaste.